Hey, what's going on, Ian? We got Ian Stanley here, and he is going to talk some email copywriting with us today. How's it going, man?
Good, man. Glad to be here.
Good. I appreciate you jumping on today and excited to kind of hear your thoughts on some of this stuff. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I guess first question gets started. Like, how did you get started with copywriting?
Uh, that's a good question. So the short version is when I was in college, I just really wanted to make money online. And so I figured I learned about sort of affiliate marketing, ClickBank, that you could get commissions for selling other people's products. And so I bought a bunch of different products, tried to sell stuff online, didn't really work that well, didn't work at all, actually. And then my senior year of college, I wrote this page for a dating product. It was really just like a pre-sale. I don't even know it was called copy at the time, but I wrote this little story about, talking to a girl. It was for dating. And we were just sending the clicks from basically Bing ads to that page to a VSL of a product we had found on ClickBank. And that was the first money I ever made. And then I wrote my own dating book and tried to sell that. And basically, just realized that I was trying to do everything online. I was trying to create the products, run traffic, do customer service, build the websites, do all this stuff. And it was most of everybody I saw doing that was failing. So I was like, why don't I just get good at one thing? And I really liked the writing part. So I was like, I'm going to get really good at copywriting. So I did Derek Johansson's copy hour course. I hand copied a sales letter every single day for an hour. Did that for like 90 days. And that was the biggest impact on how I got good. And then from there, I ended up later on, I worked with, actually, that was part of what landed me a gig working with this business in the credit space, basically an ebook on how to improve your credit score. And I wrote all of the emails, and we had over 1 million people on the list. And so I had this spreadsheet where I would just document what worked, what didn't. And that's how I got really good at email copy, was just letting the data tell me what worked and what didn't. From there, I created these types and these sort of different principles and strategies of email. And then I turned that into my 80/20 email copy crash course, which was sort of like copy hour for email copy specifically. And so that was kind of the birth of it all. And then from there, I've done quite a lot of different things, but copy's always been the basis of everything I've done, all the companies I've built, the company I sold, all that.
Nice. Yeah. And 80/20 copy or email copy is how I found you originally. And it was definitely a game changer. And I suggest like any of y'all that are watching this or listening to it right now, definitely check it out. It's amazing. It's like just like
Thanks,
opens
man.
up your eyes to how to write email copy.
Yeah, it's been sort of the flagship, the one that sort of changes things for people.
Yeah. So going back before all that, the dating products and stuff, like were you a big writer when you were a kid too?
No, I was a big reader. So I read a lot growing up. And then in college, I was reading 3 to 4 books a week on my Kindle. Just, I didn't go to class, but I'd go on the first day, get the syllabus, leave when the teacher wasn't looking, come back on the midterm and for the final. Um, and and when I did go to class, I would just read anyway. So it's like, why am I here? So I read a lot, and I was playing tennis in college. And so basically, if I wasn't playing tennis or partying, I was reading books. And so I'd read a lot, which does help you become a better writer because you've just seen so much. But actually, the only class I stopped taking in college was writing because I hated the way that they made you write and all of these rules
Hmm.
and the citing sources. And you've got to have, you have to have 10 sources in your paper about Batman. And the only B I got freshman year was in this writing class, and it was all subjective bullshit. And I realized, so I thought I didn't like writing. And what it actually turned out is I hated writing under the rules of somebody else
Yeah.
and writing about stuff I didn't care about. And so um, writing wasn't necessarily, I didn't grow up, I didn't think of myself as a great writer in high school at all. I wrote me 2 good papers. My college application papers were probably pretty decent just because I had a good story to tell, but I don't think I was a good writer. So I think I became a good writer because I practiced, and I practiced without attachment to outcome, because it wasn't, let me write, I hope this is good, as let me just practice. It was the only thing I'd ever truly practiced like that, and it paid off.
Nice. Yeah. And I guess like you were talking about earlier with having a good story to tell, like something that always helps with, writing for
Yeah, if
a
if
product
you're
or
an okay
something.
writer, but you've got a great story, it can come across well. And so my goal was always, even in my life, to have stories so compelling that a bad writer could write about them and they'd still be worth listening to. But then if you're a great writer telling a great story, now you've got something truly powerful.
Yeah, for sure. So you were mentioning earlier that you went through Copy Hour, and that was something that kind of really helped you. So was that kind of like the biggest shift for you? Is like copying all these other sales letters and things that were working
Yeah,
really
I think
well?
copying sales letters or copying emails. And so when we say hand copying, you're literally by hand writing out just verbatim what these say. And it trains your subconscious to understand what great copy is, what it looks like, how to write it. And so to this day, I'll still, when I'm, doing like a new funnel or something, I'll hand copy different sales letters and just even to get my brain going. That was a huge thing for me, and not having an attachment to the outcome. But then the second phase was actually writing my own stuff or stuff for other people's products, because I saw a lot of people in CopyEye who would hand copy for like 200 days in a row. And I'm like, oh, well, what have you written now? I'm like, oh, I haven't written anything. I'm just hand copying. Someday you just got to start writing your own stuff.
Hmm.
But that was a big shift. And then the real shift that's interesting in copy is when I was starting out with sales letters, you're wondering, you're going, is this going to sell anything? And then there's this day I remember it had that I went from, is this going to sell anything, to how much is it going to sell? And I haven't written a sales page that's not gotten a single sale ever. But in the beginning, you're wondering if it's even going to convert at all. And then you get
Right.
to that point where you're like, I know it's going to work. It's just how well will it work?
Yeah, definitely, man. And so when you were working for the credit company, I guess, like how did you kind of start kind of figuring out like what you were going to do with emails? Like, what I know you said that you were testing everything, but like when you were first getting started with that, like how did you know kind of what to write about there and start developing your style with that?
Yeah. So we sent a lot of emails. We'd send a few a week to blog posts. So we
Hmm.
had these blog posts written by article writers. And so I learned a really important lesson there, which was, curiosity subject lines that make people that don't answer, that sort of ask a question. Doesn't mean it has a question mark, but it's sort of, three mistakes to avoid, three credit cards that you should use today, or three mistakes to avoid on your credit report, or something like that. And so what I did in the beginning is then I would kind of give some of these mistakes in the email and then go read the full article here. Well, the problem is when you're answering the question, if your goal is to get clicks, because we are making a lot of our money off of AdSense on the blog post page, my click throughs weren't as high. And then what I realized was, you don't want to answer the question you ask in your subject line or in the beginning in the email. You want to answer it by they have to get the answer by clicking. If you're sending to a blog post or a VSL that that sells well. But what I really learned is how to tell stories in emails, and something I call correlation emails, which are these emails where you basically tell a story that almost seems unrelated to the topic, but somehow sort of smoothly transitions into this sale. And at the end, they're like, how did I want to buy based on this story? But they do. And so two of the most successful emails, one of them was about having a stone in your shoe. It was about your credit score. And it was basically relating how when you have a stone in your shoe, it's this immediate problem that you solve. You take your shoe off, put your hand against a wall, tip the shoe over, dump out the stone, put your shoe back on, and keep walking. And you solve that problem because it's immediate and painful, or annoying at least. And then when it comes to something like your credit score, you're like, I'll deal with that later. And it's not a problem until it is a problem. Then it's a huge problem. You're trying to buy a house. Now you're paying an extra 100,000 because your credit score is low, or you don't get approved for the loan. You don't get the car you want. So that would get people to, I call this sort of fence sitter emails, getting people off the fence. And another one I wrote was about pushing a boulder up a hill, and how it's the same as improving your credit. It's hard at first, you're straining, you're pushing, and then suddenly it just starts to happen and the boulder starts rolling down the hill effortlessly. And so there were these stories that are seemingly unrelated to credit, but I could relate them back to it, and those perform the best. And so I kind of learned this style of storytelling and selling at the same time. And those have, to this day, they're the most profitable emails. And I know you've been on my list for a long time. The story emails are the ones that make the most. I just wrote one about Owen Wilson and how
Nice.
he gets paid $1,342 every time he says this word. And then it doesn't say Owen Wilson. The subject line says, there's this actor, Owen Wilson, who gets paid every time he says the word wow, he makes $1,342. And then I relate that to my 90 Days to Freedom program, which is a like $6,000 course, and how if you learn how to write emails properly, I'm like, I don't make 1,300 per word, but I do make 1,500 per email when I write for other people, and I make more than that. That email like made like $15,000. So it took me 6 minutes to write that email, and it made me, you know, $15,000. It made our company, $15,000, which is all profit. It's on the list. So it's like, but I'm relating this story about Owen Wilson acting to how to make money writing emails. And so if you can find these great stories, that was kind of the thing that I started to do, and then figure out every list is different. So you want to figure out what that list likes. So by using that spreadsheet, I would find out, okay, it doesn't matter how good I could write about taxes. It doesn't matter how good the email is. People just don't care as much. Whereas I could write a mediocre email about credit cards and they'd click like crazy. So you find out what your list, I call it your list pulse. What does your list want? That's why you always have to test to your list. Like, just because somebody else says it's true doesn't mean it's true for your list. And it's more important to write about the right topic than it is to even write great copy. Because you can write great copy about the wrong thing and they don't care. But if you write great copy about the right thing, they really care.
Yeah. No, like it all goes back to the stories, man. And the correlation emails, I think that's like one of the biggest takeaways for me, like whenever going through that course, is just it makes writing emails fun. And then whenever you're writing something that's kind of fun to you, it's probably a lot more fun for the audience to read. Do you have kind of like any tricks like to writing good ones? 'Cause I know they can be a little difficult sometimes to kind of make that transition correctly, right? Are there any kind of tricks that you would tell people that haven't really tried this style before?
Yeah, so I call it, a lot of people have transitions that I call hammer transitions, because you're talking about one thing and then suddenly you're like, buy my product. And it feels like you're getting hit over the head with a hammer. So the transitions that I tell people to write are what I call sandpaper transitions. You're sort of smoothing it out. And it typically only takes 2 or 3 sentences to transition from story to the sale itself. And one of the best ways to find stories is, one is to have an interesting life so you can tell your own stories or get the stories out of the person you're writing for. Because for the first year and a half, I never wrote an email as myself. It was always for other people. And so, but one of the best ways is reading books. Books will write these great stories. There'll be great stories in these books, and you can retell the story and then relate it to whatever you're talking about. Like The Stone in the Shoe was from a book, I think it's called Stick, about habits, and it was talking about why people get rid of a stone in their shoe but they won't fix something else. And so I thought, oh, I can just relate that to credit. Or I saw a meme about Owen Wilson getting paid that much to say wow, 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 wow. And I thought, oh, I could relate that to email. And so you just sort of consume stories and different things. You can write about, I'll write emails about a TV show and how this person's doing this thing or whatever it is. And you just find they don't always have to be your own stories. A lot of times they're not my own story. Well, for me, it's I do write a lot of personal stories, but you can definitely just relate stories from other people. With the credit stuff, we actually almost told no personal stories about the author, or who was the guy who was, the writer of it, even though it was me, just because he didn't give me a lot of those to write about. And so I really was just finding other stories, a story about eating an elephant one bite at a time, or whatever, whatever it might have been, just finding good stories.
Yeah, nice, man. So I guess whenever you're kind of starting to write these emails, and maybe if you are writing about yourself in them, like what's a good way of kind of building rapport with the audience that you've seen? Do you have kind of any ways you do that? Like if you don't get a lot of information from, say, like a client or something, or maybe you write your own emails and you don't want to divulge too much of your own stuff,
Well,
I
if you don't want
guess.
to divulge too much of your own, that's a problem, uh,
Yeah.
in my opinion. So, it's up to you. You can have a private life, whatever, but the reality is connection happens around the rough edges. People don't, connect with the perfect parts of you. They connect with the rough edges, the hardest stories to tell. And I have a whole chapter in my book about this concept. That's tell the stories that scare you the most. So the stories that make you feel something. You were talking about fun before, right? If I'm having fun writing an email, I do stand up as well, right? And so last night I did a set. About 3 weeks ago was the last time I did a set, and I didn't have much fun on stage 3 weeks ago, and I always have fun on stage. And partially the crowd wasn't great, and I was just like, but I was doing some bids, and I was like, I just didn't have a great time, and I haven't had that feeling before. And so last night I went to go do my set, and I normally, I've got my written stuff, I kind of know what I'm going to do, but I'm thinking, all right, let me make sure I hit all my points. And I was like, I'm not going to write a set. I got all these jokes about Mormons. I'm just going to tell these stories. It's just storytelling for me. That's when I do best on stage. And I'm going to go up there and have fun. And I had fun and I killed. And my buddy even said, he was like, that might be the best set I've seen you do. And he's seen a lot of my, but he also normally knows my material before I go up, because he's a comic as well. But that fun gets translated, whether it's on a stand-up, comedy stage, on video, or in the written word. Your emotions get pushed into the person who's reading them. So if you can get yourself into an emotional state, I have this story, I know you've read, John, about my dog and how he almost died after I got him. And it's this very emotional story, and people cry reading it. It's like 2,000 words. And it was, when I wrote that story originally, it was an emotional thing for me to write. And that gets transferred to the person reading. So the stories that you're afraid to tell, the ones that make you cry, the ones that make you laugh, the ones that embarrass you, the ones that you don't want to share, those are the ones that are almost always going to have the biggest impact. And that's, it's emotional stories because they maybe are extreme or whatever they might be. Those become kind of your key flagship stories, but you're not going to be able to write those every day because you're not having deeply emotional, intense things, hopefully, happening every single day. That's kind of the shortcut, is what makes you feel something. If it makes you feel something, it's going to make other people feel something. And people don't buy results, they buy feelings. And the more you make them feel in advance, the more they're going to buy.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to put yourself on the page. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And if it's not you that you're writing about, you can, I didn't get to write those stories when I started out. So I just found other stories. And it really, if you Google, it's incredible. Like, so one of the best sales letters I ever wrote, it was a VSL, was, first line is, John didn't know he was going to die that night. And all it was a story I found about a guy who died during a blackout because he lit a candle in his trailer park, or in his trailer, and he died. And then there was another guy who had a backup generator, but the gas leaked and killed him in his sleep. And I just Googled those stories about what had happened. It was selling a $2,000 solar generator. And I just Googled stories, and then I wrote one for another survival product. And it was, these two guys got stranded on an island, like 600, a few thousand miles from where they left off. They got stranded. One of them survived and one didn't. And the one who didn't survive just wasn't willing to, like, literally drink turtle blood. He could have survived. He just wasn't willing to do what it took. And so it's like, all I did was Google that story. It took me 2 hours to write the entire sales page. So just Google stories about, can be about other people. But Google's, pretty useful.
Yeah, no, that's a great lead. Drinking turtle blood.
Pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. Dude, sweet, man. This has been really, really helpful, man. So I guess last question is, like, if anyone wants to get in touch with you and kind of learn more about what you're working with, what you're working on, how can they do that?
Yeah, so you can always go opt in at feedthewolf.com. If you just want to get on my general list, I would recommend for people reading this or watching this is probably to get my book. It's called Confessions of a Persuasion Hitman. It's free. You cover shipping. The shipping is literally like $5.89. Or go to the 80/20 email copy crash course is really the best course for anybody who's specifically interested in email. And we even have this 90 days to freedom program, which literally shows you how to land clients getting paid 5-10 grand a month writing emails. But you can find out about any of those at feedthewolf.com, or persuasionhitman.com is where my book is as well. Those are the two best places to go. Follow me on Instagram at Becoming Ian Stanley. And then I post a bunch of free videos on YouTube, and it's just Ian Stanley on YouTube.
Yeah,
It's a bunch of free stuff up there.
you've been crushing the YouTube content lately, man.
Yeah, there's three videos every week, so there's a lot there. We've had people message us and say they made 10 grand just from one of the free videos. So there's good info.
Yeah. Check out the YouTube, get the book for sure, get the courses and everything. It's awesome stuff. And thanks so much for being on today. This has been rad.
Dude, it's fun.